Hello and welcome to Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on Calgary's Business. Joining me today is Michael Holden, who is Vice President of Policy and Chief Economist for the Business Council of Alberta. Thanks for joining us today, Michael.
Thank you.
Well, last Friday, Statistics Canada came out with its latest employment and unemployment numbers for Alberta and for Calgary. Just first of all, Michael, just a general thoughts that you have on what those numbers signify and show.
Well, I think that what we saw in May was there was a modest rebound in employment across the province. So the province, we gained about 28,000 jobs, and that was after having lost a total of about 360,000 or more over the previous couple of months. So I think that, this to me was something that was about what I had expected. And it's simply like, I think that we've hit the bottom in terms of the impact of the economic shutdown. And this reflects the beginning of our gradual climb back out of the hole that we've dug ourselves into.
Okay, now I am not an economist or a numbers guy, so maybe you could explain this to me. So while I looked at the Stats Canada numbers, they showed that, Alberta gained 28,000 plus jobs. But then when I dug down, Calgary lost 33,900, Edmonton lost 48,200. So for me, it doesn't it doesn't jive. I don't know. Can you explain that to me?
Sure. Yeah, that's simply a case of how these numbers are calculated, and it's because when StatsCan looks at employment data at a city level, they use a different methodology than they use provincially. So provincially, it's just a straight up survey, and then they will produce the numbers for each province for the country. But for cities, what they do is, because as your sample size gets smaller and smaller, you have fewer and fewer people within the community, so that are being sampled. And so what they do is, in order to smooth out volatility at the city level, they use a 3-month moving average. So the numbers that we see for May for Calgary are in fact an average of May, April, and March data. So the provincial numbers are accurate in the sense that they're a survey result based on what happens in May. The Calgary and Edmonton and other regional parts of Alberta, those numbers reflect the average of those 3 periods. So we're still going to see those go down for a couple more months before they go back up again.
Okay, let's talk about the unemployment rate in the province. What was it, 15.5, was it?
Something like that, yeah, 15.4, I think.
Yeah.
15.5, no, you're right.
What what does that tell us? And is that expected to go higher?
Well, I don't think it's going to go down at any point in the near future, because what has happened is, over the last couple of months, is in order to count as being unemployed, you actually be actively searching for a job. And so in the previous couple of months, what we saw is that, and that's the labor force participation rate is the term for that. And so in February, that was sitting around 70% or so of Albertans either had a job or were actively looking for one. And then the number of people looking for a job tumbled down to about 63% in a couple of months, and it's starting to climb back up. And so what's happening now is that and so the unemployment rate went up from April in spite of the number of new jobs that we got, and that's just simply a matter of how it's calculated. So as more Albertans start to try to actively look for work again, the ones that are unable to find work will start counting as unemployed, whereas they weren't counted as unemployed before. And so it's just it's a math trick. And so because of this kind of not a trick rather, but it's the way these numbers are calculated. So I think that what we're going to see in the next couple of months is, as more Albertans start looking for work, that's going to prevent the unemployment rate from falling significantly. So it's at 15.5% now. We're going to see double-digit unemployment rates for at least the next 2 or 3 months, probably closer to 6.
Okay, as you look into the second half of this year, in terms of employment and job numbers, what do you expect for the second half?
Well, they'll start to climb back up, but we're not going to snap back up and regain those 360,000 jobs in a matter of 2 or 3 months. So the job gains that we did see in May were largely in those industries that were most directly affected by the shutdown. So they were in accommodation, food services, hospitality, retail, transportation, and those kinds of areas. And so the number of jobs there will continue to increase. They're not going to snap back to what they were before, partly because of the gradual reopening strategy that the province has, partly because of things like capacity requirements in retail establishments and at bars and restaurants and stuff. So that right now, bars and restaurants have to operate at half capacity. So that means they're going to have about half the number of people working there. And so that will prevent it from snapping right back up. And the second thing that's going to be happening here too is that some industries weren't affected right away. And the two biggest examples of that are construction and energy. So if you looked at the March and April jobs numbers for those two industries in particular, they didn't go down by very much at all. In fact, I think in March they went up. And largely that's because those kinds of industries, they don't shut down right away. And construction is a good example. They will have ongoing work that's continued, but they don't have any new work coming in. So we're not going to see a lot of growth. In fact, we're probably going to see delayed reaction job cuts in those industries in the months ahead. And so that's going to slow down the overall rate of recovery across the province.
Okay, super. Thanks, Michael, for joining us today.
Thank you.
That was Michael Holden, Vice President of Policy and Chief Economist with the Business Council of Alberta. This has been Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi. Thanks for joining us today.